Hello, my name is Adam Bean and welcome to 2019 or the 58th episode of EHEX TV. So let's start with the contents. So EHEX FM, the podcast, got two new episodes. One with Roberto Cortes is Tommy committer, and we had a chat about Tommy and a nice conference, J-Nation from Coimbra Jack, and also a really nice conversation with Alexis. Alexis was community manager at Sun, was responsible for Glassfish, and now he's developer advocate at Google Cloud. So there was a really nice conversation from Glassfish minus jar, so Java minus jar Glassfish to Google Cloud, Java at Google Cloud. So what's interesting, as you can see, so the EHEX FM got direct links, so we can refer now to episodes. For instance, the episode 19 refers to interview with Scott McNeely. So, and the page is generated with SPG, and the SPG was not able to use indices because I use Mustache. So what I did, I switched to handlebars, and now 3 days ago I created a new version of SPG, which supports handlebars, and I also implemented a math helper, so in order to generate a better EHEX FM. So EHEX FM is a static page without any JavaScript. It is generated in background. Okay, so this is the toy news about EHEX FM. And by the way, EHEX FM does really well, so I pay more and more for the bandwidth, and the episodes are downloaded several hundred times in the first 24 hours, and then they keep steady. So I hope, or I think it's good for a podcast. Okay, so there's a couple more episodes already in the queue. So now SPG static page generator is covered, and I will, I think, in future maintain it SPG a bit. There are some interesting plans with that. Okay, now watch this. What I would like to do is to set up a Java E8 project, and I would call the project, let's call it EHEX TV. And what it will do, it will generate the well-known essential archetype, and it happened. So there is an EHEX TV project, and this EHEX TV project can be built with Maven clean installs, and no surprises here. So, and after build, it just comprises an empty resource, or pink resource. So because of conventional configuration, I exactly know that the EHEX TV project has to comprise EHEX TV war, which can be deployed to a server. Now, what I have here is a Web for Liberty profile, which doesn't come with a plugin, for instance, for NetBeans or Visual Studio Code. And what I would like to do is to launch the server here. Server, let's switch to Java 8, because Java 11 produces some warnings. So server and run. So now the default server is launched in a few seconds. And by the way, this is the largest possible Open Liberty installation, and it comes with Java 8 full profile and micro profile to 0, and it takes longer because it is forced to generate SSL keys because of Corba in Java E8. Okay, so now what I would like to introduce to you is a tool called VAD. And it is wrapped with a shell script, and as you can already see, it points to Open Liberty. So, and I will just launch it, and what happens right now, it performs initial build. It knows that it uses the POM XML, and it builds that and copies the war to drop-ins. And now it was deployed here somewhere in the Open Liberty. So as you can see, default host EHEX TV. So I could actually access that with this. So let's see, a little bit risky, but resources and ping, and it works. So this was risky, but it works. So okay. So now the cool story is I can now open with for instance Visual Studio Code, and change, for instance, something here, and say enjoy Java EE 8 in 2019. So if I do this, what should happen immediately? So what will recognize the change, and it builds the whole war in 3 seconds. By the way, it should get faster and faster because it holds the Maven and optimizes Maven. So Maven does not stop; it just runs in background, and it copies this 3 kilobyte war to WebSphere, OpenLiberty, and the new result should be available here. Why are you showing this? Because I got lots of questions about that, and people, suggesting that I should use the Java agents to replace classes, how to debug that, and what watch and deploy. This is the name of what watch and deploy. What it just does, it just uses the already existing POM XML. And on every change of sources, it rebuilds everything and pushes it to a server. And what I do usually now in my project, I'm pushing to 3 servers to check out whether my solution is actually portable. So I'm launching 3 servers on different ports. So 9080, the only problem is Payara and Glassfish or Payara and Whitefly, because they're using the same ports, and Tommy. So you can launch on different ports and push or build it once and deploy it to several servers. And I don't have to rely on plugins for that. And this is fast enough, so I don't have to use an agent. So my current project uses Bouncy Castle and lots of libraries. So the war is actually larger. It is 5 megs because of Bouncy Castle. And the deployment takes 4.5 seconds. So it's still fast enough, so I don't need any agents. Okay, so now I covered, I think, a couple of questions regarding what and what is released. There are several versions already, and I'm maintaining it actively because I have to use, or I'm using what in my projects right now. And this is called Watch and Deploy, and there's even a screencast recorded. So if you're interested, just take a look at it. That is completely compatible with the idea of thin wars. Okay, what covered? Oh, very good. So there are new dates for the spring workshops, and guaranteed without spring is like the season. And what I do is with Java 8 with microprofile. So I merge Java 8 and microprofile together. I will cover both. This is absolutely doable. I tried that in December, so it will work. So Java 8 with microprofile bootstrap in a single day, then best practices, and then Java 8 with microprofile test and quality, so about testing, pipelines, and so forth. And a week later, we have the web fundamentals or essentials is the April. So what I will do here is to build with you progressive web apps without any frameworks, with productively. So there is we did it in December, and all the attendees said after the show to me that this is way easier than they actually thought, and they are seriously reconsidering, ditching all the frameworks, just go with the standards. And effective web goes one step further. And it will contain something like offline first and service workers and more advanced topics, navigation, routing, and stuff like that. Okay, covered. Okay, so I think SPG is also covered, and we all enjoying Java 8 in 2019. Okay, now I think we can start with the topics, and I would like to close that, or just keep it. So let's see whether any questions. No questions. And Suchwerk is in the chat, but Twitter, as always, is lazy. Okay. OS 10,000 asked me, my current problem is writing a stream from JMS into a database monster, which is interesting. It seems like big data. The thing takes ages to add a record. However, if I do add 1,000 records, it does not take any longer. So, which is strange, but it's interesting. So my approach was to take your resource adapter, and my resource adapter tutorial, I think, is what he meant is this. So I implemented 2 resource adapters, one which starts threads and the other one writes to files. I think it's this. So it is already old. It is with the real world Java 6 from the book Java 6 Rethinking Best Practices. And the question is, do you have a better or more elegant way? I think JCA connectors are great. So they they understand transactions and concurrency. But I think there's easy way to do this. So if you just have Java 8, you can send asynchronous events, CDI async events, and each event can be consumed or start a new transaction. So you get parallel behavior for free, and these events can even use behind the scenes a thread pool, which is a managed executor service, which can be injected. So this would be, I think, a very easy way to do that. Other way is you could just use completable future and do the same, or you can even use microprofile with bulkheads and asynchronous transaction. So this will also work. And the fastest possible performance you will probably get with JDBC, plain JDBC, and batch writes. And what I would start with is with JPA, for instance, Eclipse link, and use some proprietary features with, like I think it's called batch write, where JPA will use behind the scenes the batch write features of JDBC. I think the method in JDBC is called doBatch. Okay. Now, next question. Hello, Adam. I want to do expensive computation on my JMS message in parallel. Setting a high count on the messages per transaction. Messages per transaction, this is strange because in JMS, each message starts usually a new transaction, and to have more parallel behavior, you would increase the size of the pool of the message-driven bean, so you get more parallel behavior. The higher the message-driven bean pool size, the higher the parallelism. And if you are using, for instance, MQ-Series from IBM, then you can specify the number of threads on the MQS adapter level. So I was hoping to relax the message order by taking them from the queue and putting them into a persistent tuple space. But the nearest thing I could find was InfiniSpan, which is not persistent. This is correct. So if you have already JMS, so I still don't understand where the problem is, because JMS is parallel. So it is harder to be sequential in JMS than be parallel. So the parallel behavior is the default in JMS. And what people or projects struggle with is to make JMS behave sequentially. So in your case, it seems like you are using JMS listen as a singleton or something, because in message-driven beans would be parallel per default. How do you realize the processing order? So this is really strange. So your behavior is like you're struggling with a problem which many project would consider as a feature, because they really would like to have the processing order in place. So I don't think this is the reason, but just try to play with the acknowledge. So client acknowledge, auto acknowledge with this setting. So usually you get more parallel behavior. Also, sometimes the GMS connection factories on application servers, you can specify the isolation levels on the transaction level, which is usually application server specific. And so usually it should be two parallel, and in something is wrong with the. I guess you are not using Java E properly. So probably the JMS listen is a singleton, and it is or started in a wide thread outside the application server, something like this. Now, Chilis92 asked me, why do large companies prefer Spring over Java E? So in my world, large companies still use Java E. So this is the funny thing. So actually, in all my whatever I do is Java E. But on conference I see a lot of Spring and Spring Boot, and I actually asked the same question in the AHEX FM show with Roberto Cortes. So this is the show number 22. So we have now persistent link, so 22, and Roberto had a great explanation for that. So what Roberto said is that Spring Boot comes with lots of tutorials, and if people searching for solutions, for instance, for JAX-RS or Jersey, they will find the Spring Boot solution first and not the Java E solution, and therefore Spring is more popular. So the explanation seems reasonable. So just re-listen, please, the podcast. So you will find the explanation from Roberto. And I think two years ago, something funny happened to me. Is like a client of me called me because of Java EE problems, and they had problems with Java EE rather than Spring Boot, and they thought that this is actually Java EE. So I think this might be the explanation for that. So this is the only explanation I have. Spring Boot is very similar to Java EE, and I've just used Java EE, and my clients are really happy. And my clients are also very large companies, or very, very large companies, and also small one. Now, the Shy Guy, and he actually traveled all the way from Nigeria to AHEX workshop in Munich airport, and we had lots of interesting conversation with him. So Shy Guy built like a banking hub with Java EE for a Nigerian central bank, which is really interesting. So first, please in making our wars as thin as possible. So he would like to have thin wars and lots of external libraries, how to do that. Now, what I also did, I wanted actually to record a screencast about that, but it happened silently behind the scenes before Christmas, before the vacations. I created a S2I image for Payara, which can be used within the Docker as well as an OpenShift. And how it works is this OpenShift image is based on Payara 5 S2I, so it is on the image from DocLens. So this is works exactly with thin wars as you would expect. And the interesting part is what it also does is you can place your jars, and the jars are copied to X jar, and also the war file is copied to the deployment folder. So you can create your own layer. And a similar approach to that, and this is very fast, so you can build image in seconds because and run it on OpenShift. And I will record a screencast about that. So you can do the same in your case. So what you could do, you don't have to use S2I. You could use, for instance, your own central bank image with all the dependencies, and you have to see where to put the dependencies, whether in X folder or the application server lib folder. You have to try it out. I would try it out first outside Docker and then create the image. And then what you will do, inherit from the image and just provide the thin war. This is how it should work. Okay. Yeah, external jars, yes, but it should be on the image, but you can have a couple of images. So like in DocLens, we have, the operating system image. From operating system image usually inherits Java image, then we have an application server image, and then you can inherit from there your own configured image. And then at the very, very end, you get your thin war. And the thin war is built constantly, and all the other images, they will build, I would say, 4 times a year or once a quarter. And now we had a talk at the airhacks.com workshops in Munich about keeping the whole JPA graph in memory and use lambdas for high performance calculations. And because he had Shy Guy had some specific requirements. And he asked me how to refresh that, because if everything is in memory and the database changes, how to refresh the graph. And there is one method called refresh, entity manager refresh, and it cascades really well. So the question is, what you could do, either try with refresh or drop all the cache and reload everything from database again, would also work. Please do you know any library that passes accurate GPS information to Java desktop JavaFX apps? This is going to be hard, because usually if you have a desktop client, what the browsers are doing, they're using the wireless LAN, for instance, for calculate the location. And there are lots of JavaScript apps or APIs which are able to do that. What you should also you can search for is there are databases for let's see, there's a GNU database GPS, for instance. Public Wi-Fi database, Open BMap, and Open Wi-Fi, where you can use your Mac and BSSID, and you will get the GPS coordinates for that. So there are already some solutions about that. And if you have a GPS device, because the desktop doesn't have the GPS receiver, then usually you could communicate via USB or whatever you have with the USB device, with a USB dongle usually. and the USB dongle would provide you the coordinates, and then you can resolve the coordinates with, for instance, OpenStreetMaps. So you can absolutely do that, and you can load OpenStreetMaps into, for instance, in JavaFX into the how it's called, a web view. Okay, thank you for attending. And Shay Guy told me 50 hours or something, so just crazy, just to visit, some Java stuff on the airport Munich. Now, I have seen your approach to build. Christian K asked me, I have seen your approach to build vanilla JavaScript router using the hash change. What would be the best approach to implement lazy loading for that lean router? What Christian saw is my training called Effective Web Training. I forgot actually. This was Effective, and I'm being GitHub Effective repositories, and it's called Effective Web. Effective Web.training, and what he saw is this workshop. It's Effective Web Training, and what I did here, Effective Web Standards, I created an hash-based router, but I think he didn't saw the whole show, because what I did is I implemented, just take a look at the commit 190, lazy loading with import. So the hash, I started with dynamic imports and exactly what you said was the chunks, but at the end I get rid of the dynamic behavior, because I said for small apps it is not worth to have dynamic loading of scripts if at the end of the day you will need everything for a desktop app. So I started with dynamic loading and a generic approach, and then for simplicity and maintainability reasons I just switched back to the switch case again. So this is the commit. Take a look at the commit 190 of the Effective Web Training sample, which is completely free. Okay, I hope is covered. So okay, and even I use chunks. So I even created the chunks. What chunks are reusable JavaScript snippets, because which problem do you get? So I have a lit.html library, for instance, and the lit.html library, if I load everything on demand, it would be included in every route, for about route and, I don't know, create route and list route. And so I will get redundant references to lit.html. And what I did in the workshop is I created chunks, so the lit.html was automatically extracted to a common JavaScript files, and all the other files reference to this file. Okay. So this is actually part of the course. So now Robert Nistroy asked me, or claims, NetBeans is not able to debug that, and he's absolutely right. I actually didn't try it even. What I usually do, so this is not a problem, but what I do is if there is complex expression within the filter or map, I always create a method reference or a method and use a method reference to access that, and the methods are absolutely debuggable, and from my point of view, they are also easier to understand. So before I write a crazy complex expression here, I would rather like to extract the method or the expression to a method, and then I can even unit test the method separately. Okay, now Guru Kulkarni asked me, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you as well. And he saw all my web series, Web Standards Igniter, Components, and Effective Web Standards. So thank you a lot. So now he asked me, more could follow, it will even follow, but right now I'm a little bit overloaded with work, but I have lots of ideas what I can also record. I have to be a little cautious because the last one, Effective Web Standards, I had to stop in one point of time because I had, I don't know, 50 episodes or something. It's way too long. Okay, now what he does is I'm trying to use web components for a pet projects, Java 8 and Microprofile, which is very good. And I can just copy the CSS and JS and HTML in the web app folder. You can do this, yes. and when Maven clean package is run. So for instance, you could use what for that. So you saw the watch and deploy tool, it will automatically package everything and ship it. So this is what I would use. Screencast, I already did it. So with what it will work in source main web app, you can maintain the CSS and HTML. What you can also do, you can use browser sync and point to the very same directory. So I started in my workshops browser sync, and the browser sync pointed to source folder. And if you start browser syncs within your war, you will point to source main web app, and you achieve the same. So and just to have Maven clean package. By the way, this Maven clean package, I got the idea of what watch and deploy by using browser sync in web. So something like this would be nice actually in Java as well. And now the second question is, in the course you use lit HTML by installing then using rollup to just get the HTML. Exactly. However, has an even better way to do this and possibly opening up a wider way to include minimal libraries. Unpackaged lit HTML, yes, unpackaged. Absolutely. The problem with that is I'm using what I showed you in my video, I use it also in my projects. So, and my clients wouldn't accept to be dependent on an external library. So what I do is I package whatever we need, I put it to my project, and we have a Jenkins pipeline which on demand we can refresh the dependencies, and usually I don't have a lot. So lit HTML, sometimes a Keycloak library, and sometimes 3DS, and this basically is. Moment.js probably in some cases, but we have probably 3 libraries, so it's not worth, to have something specific. But you're right, you could do that, but for my projects, it wouldn't fly, so no one would accept this solution. In a pet project, absolutely go for that. Now, when you include a script in HTML, you can define this as async. Do you know what effect it has on the loading? I have not experimented yet, but will soon do that. Yeah, there are 2 actually. You can use script async, or you can use script defer. So you have 2 possibilities, async or defer. What I did in my workshops and also do in my projects right now is I put the script on the very end before the body closes. So what effect does it have? My whole HTML is parsed, and then the script is found, and the script kicks in, the browser stops and tries to, to parse the JavaScript. So my JavaScript is not a framework, so it's really fast. So everyone was satisfied with the performance. So far, there was no need to optimize that. But the fastest possible performance you will get with putting script, not async, rather than defer into a header. So what is the difference between async and defer? So defer means defer will parse and process the script asynchronously, but wait with the execution until the DOM is parsed. And async means it will load the script asynchronously and execute it if it's ready, so the parsing will stop, and then the script is going to be executed. So if you would like to have the best possible performance, go with script defer and use it in header. My solution is good enough and simpler and supported by more browsers, although async and defer is widely supported by all browsers actually. Great question, thank you. You want to keep UI and backend code separate from question 1. Could you record a screencast where you could make use of, for instance, Payara virtual server to serve static content? What I would do, I would run the entire Payara in a new Docker image, because it is lightweight enough that there is no need to have an own virtual server. So just start another Payara. You will lose probably 60 megs of RAM, but who cares about that? I could record a podcast, but it would be very boring. And if you would like to experiment with something, just run, for instance, HTTP server from the JDK. Or you could use Nginx, which is has nothing to do with Java, but is the wide adopted standard web server, or Apache is also not also great. Okay, so now Michael asked me, Adam, you typically create a boundary and JAX-Source resource for microservices. What clues suggest not create facade and have JAX-Source resource only? And I got the question multiple times. For me, it was absolutely obvious that why to use it and when not to use it. And for that, I would like, I wrote actually a blog post about that. And the blog post was, cloud-ready configuration. No, sorry, not that. Here, Jaxor as resource, 1 or 2 classes as boundary. And what I did is I tried to explain it with a code, a little bit of code. So if you have the Jaxor as resource, which looks like that, I mean, you can perfectly fine unit test that. You have Pojo-like results and Pojo-like input parameter, not problem to test that. But if you have a resource which looks like that, response, JSON object, and sometimes even HTTP headers here, is really hell to test, because it is even impossible to test, because here, response read entity, you get a strange errors, and you will need specific libraries, to omit the error. So in this particular case, I would split the resource into a resource and facade, which I did in my post, and then I will test the calculator and will never test the resource, or the resource would be tested with system test, but not with a unit test. Okay, and by the way, I saw something and completely forgot to mention that. Where is it? Here. These are the dates for the AHEX TV shows, this time generated with Java 8, and all the dates are set. You can register if you like by going to Ustream channel, and then you get probably notifications via email that about the shows. But these are the dates for upcoming AHEX TV shows, and this is always first Monday of the month. Some shows can slip. This end of year is always a little bit dangerous. Okay, next one. Adam, in your presentation, how to structure Jakarta EE applications for productivity without bloat. He says that he asked me, and said, okay, why people are using REST model and exceptions package structure. And I asked, where you saw that. He says, and he did some investigations, like X files, and say, okay, a colleague found that, and the root of all evil is Red Hat, seems like. So there is a visit the JBoss ERP website. So let's do this. Hopefully, here is it. And then, if you do this, you probably get, this strange package structure. So let's see. But I believe him that you get the structure here will look like this. And I think it is understandable, because if you start with, Hello World tutorial, there is not a lot of business logic there. So therefore, Red Hat started with REST model and exceptions, but you cannot, you cannot maintain a large project with this structure. It's just crazy. But thank you. And by the way, so in this project, they have the structure: controller, data, model, REST service util. This is the beginning root of all evil, which is a very good thing, because in one point of time, I get a code review contract to to review the project and restructures, because no one knows anymore how it actually works. So be a little bit careful with the internet tutorials. They always start with the simplest possible application, and this is not always well structured. Most of the Java 8 tutorials, they'll focus on the technology, not, on larger projects, or larger. For me, larger project, more serious project with, business background, not just Hello World. Okay. Cool. So thank you. Thank you a lot. Where are my questions? Okay. Now, Dempile asked me, can you explain with an example how do you do JWT authentication with microprofile? I could, but this is extremely simple. And why? You will just inject claims and you are set. And the only challenge is you will need an SSO solution like Keycloak, so you will have to set up, the public keys and private keys, and this is the challenge. And in ES6, you would use, for instance, the Keycloak client, so you can just download the client, put it to the Keycloak JavaScript client, and then it will already redirect you to the login page and redirect you back, so the solution is simple. And if you, for instance, search for Payara JWT microprofile, you will find the authentication example, and which exactly specifies how the tokens have to look like. And they created system tests, and the code is just simplistic. So it's a path, get path protected, rows allowed, and you can access the point, and what usually you will need. The only thing is that the application, the JAX-ORS resource has to be annotated with something I forgot. So there is like a additional annotation on the JAX-ORS application, which you have to think about. And the only problem is every application server stores, this is actually login config auth method mpjwt. So what you have to do is to put this login config on the JAX-ORS application, and then it should work. But the problem is, Payara stores the keys somewhere else than OpenLiberty and Whitefly as well. So this is the only challenge here. And so if I will have to record 5 podcasts to show you how it works with every server. So the code is trivial. Setup can be complex. Okay, done. And the next one, Rajesh from Toronto says, if you're interested in advanced explanation, look at great conference talk, but only in Polish language. Okay, this is not that. I just double check that. So if you go here, there is a talk about hexagonal architecture in Polish. So if you like, translate that. But they have 4,500 views, so it's quite popular, and 96 likes. So it seems like a great talk about hexagonal architecture. So if you're interested in hexagonal architectures and you speak Polish, or you can, I think hopefully the slides are in English. Let's see. Seems like. Okay, you can take a look on this. So seems like it speaks Polish, but slides are English. So take a look on this and like his presentation. Would be nice. Okay, now back to my topics. We covered a lot, hexagonal architectures, and a note on 2018 predictions. I'm working on, of course, of 2019 predictions, but take a look what I did or what I said in 2018. So thin wars become a mainstream. I don't think exactly. So there are still lots of big wars in the wild. But what already happened is, if I'm in a project or code review and I ask, why your war is so big, I don't get answers anymore because you are stupid, rather than, okay, sorry, we have to investigate that. So it seems like people recognize that build speed, deployment speeds is all about productivity, and putting everything, the whole Java ecosystem to a war is not the best solution. So this is what happened. It's not like extreme mainstream, but what really happens is after conferences, people come to me and they live, the self-constraining thin war approach, which I really appreciate. And what I can tell you, my clients really like that. So next one. Microservices become just another solution for a problem and not a general architecture. I think this is completely true. I even saw, conference talks like, microservices are not always good for you and stuff like that. And my point was always just use a microlith, macroservice, or just a monolith, whatever you call it. I always start with a single war and add microservices if needed. Serverless overuse, absolutely. So a startup, they came to me and they already had AWS Lambdas and an application server, and I asked them one question. Do you really think that the Lambdas are cheaper than the application server because they have a constant stream of transactions? And I say, you are paying per invocation. On an application server, you would just pay, for the image the whole time. And it turned out the application server are cheaper, and therefore they switching from Lambda to application server because in this particular case it's cheaper, and the serverless is really perfect. So serverless for us, the Java EE developers, is the perfect case for lambdas is, for instance, message-driven beans. So if you have a message-driven beans architecture or JMS listen architecture or command architecture, you could very easily replace a command or message-driven bean with a function. But it's really hard to build, complex system with lots of functions because it's harder to debug, it is harder to maintain, and is not very productive. But if it fits well, it's just perfect and great. So, but watch the costs. And what I see also a trend is that the private clouds are actually are getting more and more popular. Even Amazon, Google, and Azure provide they can ship you their own servers to on premise to you, so you can run the Amazon cloud on premise right now. OpenLiberty could become the killer Java 8 and Java 9 server or Java 11 server. I think it became. So more and more projects are using OpenLiberty, and OpenLiberty is. I never heard something negative about that, and some of my clients already using OpenLiberty. I think we should push OpenLiberty a little bit more because it's a really great server. Now, SQL revival, Postgres. I think Postgres is also gaining momentum. So I was right. I was actually surprised that I wrote this 1 year ago. I completely forgot about the prediction 2018. But yeah, Postgres really is gaining traction and is a great SQL database. And in one of my current project clients wanted to ask me Elasticsearch or Postgres, and in this particular case, we also used Postgres because it was there was we don't need full text search. JMS revival. I think it in my project, yes, some enterprise projects, for instance, clients they wanted to introduce Kafka, but they wanted to misuse Kafka for transient JMS or for transient messaging. And what we used instead, we used JMS, which worked perfectly because we already had a central JMS server, so we could use JMS for communication of like publish-subscribe communication. And Kafka would be completely wrong decision because Kafka is more like persistent event store. It's not like publish-subscribe transient event model. We don't have to have persistent messages for that. And this is what didn't happen. So we don't saw any trouble with Java 9 modules in microservices. No one tried to attempt to use this Java module system mixing with microservices. This was I was a little bit afraid of that, and but it didn't happen. So all my projects are reasonable. With Java 11 or Java 9 was used without modules for microservices. So I was wrong in point 7. Point 8: Fat clients are back. Service workers, cache APIs. Push notifications right now, IndexedDB, absolutely. So I would say 30 to 40% of my project is just clients ask me to move away from Angular and just replace Angular with stock web standards. And I think it will happen even more in 2019 because as you probably know, Microsoft Edge gets the Chromium engine, and then all the browsers will support really well WebComponents. And WebComponents is going to be accepted technology for visual components in all the frameworks. And the only question is, do we really need a framework for the remaining thing? So the year of use the platform. Actually, yes, this was use of the year of use the platform, and in more, in all my greenfield projects, we just used ThinWar on the back end and no dependencies in the front end. So we used the Javaistic way of creating applications. We took the idea of Java and applied it to the front end. And what happened then? We just had, in one project, the client asked me, "Where's NPM? Why? How you build the stuff?" It's like, we don't have to build it. I mean, everything is ready to go. We use ES6. There was no transpilation needed because it was an enterprise project. So the client was happy with Chrome, so got funny reactions with that. Server-side rendering, it took off. SPG, I do everything with SPG. What should happen? Actually, I will use it. I use it in some of my project GSPs. Actually, great technology for server-side rendering. Didn't saw it a lot outside my projects, but I know JSP have really bad name. So this is the project, the problem. So now, Web components, yeah. Web components are really everywhere. If you even Vardin, for instance, we have also there's an episode about web components and Vardin. I also had a chat with Chatai from GSF. They're also working on vanilla web components, and Shadow DOM and ES6 is just great way. So this is already Vardin on Prime Elements. No build is the best build, absolutely. I'm just using on Jenkins. I only need npm to launch something like rollup and to transpile the incompatible part, but I don't need any build for my daily work. ES7 became very similar to Java. It is actually a funny story. At the end of the year at the airport Munich, I had a workshop like a Swing migration or Swing JavaFX migration workshop to web standards. And there were seasoned Java, Swing, and JavaFX developers with huge projects from all over the world, actually. And they showed me the application, and I hacked something with web and tried to help them, to give them ideas how to migrate a Swing or JavaFX to web if they really want to. And what the consistent opinion was, it is amazing how similar JavaScript already is to Java, and it is getting even more similar to Java. And after the workshop, they felt confident that they actually can, migrate their stuff to a web without any additional frameworks. Okay, I think we are done. This was a dense show, and by the way, the Java man. This was the session about from GSF and prime faces to web components. So this show is relevant to you, and the show web components with or without Java 21. Okay, now let's see. Yeah, we covered everything. So see you on these dates. This was, and of course, if you like, at Munich Airport is around the corner. So I forgot actually which room we booked. Sometimes we don't get the largest room, so therefore I had to close the workshop in December. So if you like to attend, please register early, so then we can plan better. And what sometimes works is that I can ask for a larger room if possible, because but the earlier I know, the better it is for us. Let's see what there are questions in Twitter. No questions. And Michael asked, Infinity can be configured to use persistent storage using it in the project. It can absolutely be persistent storage. Also, if you think about this, if you have enough nodes running at the same time, it is almost persistent, because everything has to go down to lose the persistence. And by the way, the statistic of my block, they are held in memory for years. It's not Infinispan rather than Hazelcast, but both are very similar. And both have a listener, and the listener can intercept on each change, can write the changes down to a database. And if you need such a database, take a look at MapDB, for instance. Okay, so I wish you all the best for 2019. Thank you. See you in February or at Airport Munich. So thank you and bye.